Hi, I'm Curt Doty of RealmIQ. This is our podcast, RealmIQ Sessions, where we talk about everything AI with AI leaders from around the world. And, please give us a follow or subscribe. Today's guest is Russell Schwartz, currently the associate professor at Chapman University, Dodge College of Film and New Media, but he has a rich history in movie marketing with companies like Gramercy Pictures, New Line Cinema, and he has worked with some of the biggest filmmakers of all time. Russell, thank you so much for joining us today. Happy to have you as a guest. We go way back. Our kids were raised together and your family friend, but, certainly appreciate your professional expertise and your career. So did I get your bio right? Do you want to add anything to it? Because
No, that's fine. I mean, I guess I started really in the mid '80s, which dates me a bit, but I don't care. Sort of at the really, very beginning of the American independent cinema movement. There was a couple of smaller companies that existed at that point. Myself, I had a company called Island Pictures, which was run by Island Records owner named Chris Blackwell, who was a legend in his own world. And then that migrated into a short term at Miramax, pre all their nonsense. But, there were some amazing movies working then. And then in early 91, 92, I joined started a company called Gramercy Pictures, which was a joint venture with Universal and Polygram, which is a British production company owned by the music company Philips. Well, Polygram Records owned by Philips. And that idea was to use 4 or 5 independent production companies sort of feeding into a centralized distribution mechanism, which was my company at that point. And, we had an amazing number of companies. We had Working Title with, I don't know whether these names mean very much to you, but Working Title, which has done, an enormous amount of British movies over the years. We had a deal with Jodie Foster's company, A Pictures. We had a deal with the original Propaganda, which then became Anonymous, which is, another great prolific producer. Ted Field from Interscope Records. So anyway, it was all about these individual companies feeding into the central. So it's it was a horizontal feed rather than a typical corporate vertical feed. So the kinds of movies that came out of those companies were all very, very distinct and unique to each other. So we weren't following a prescribed thought process or how to make independent movies. They were just free to go. And, there's some very, very, really, really successful movies. I mean, probably. Well, Working Title also produced the Coen Brothers movies at that point. So I got involved with Fargo and the Big Lebowski. They had another movie called Four Weddings and a Funeral, and it just went on and on and on with thing. It was a great time. But like at one point, these companies actually, Polygram tried to become bigger and compete with the studios. And that was where their big mistake was. So they ramped up another company on top of mine to compete, which of course, the movies they came up with didn't quite work. So, within a short term, that was the end of that. And pieces of my company then merged into what became USA Films, owned by Barry Diller. And then that was a few years. Again, another great run of movies, probably most known for Traffic, the Soderbergh film. And then I was asked to join New Line as head of marketing in early 2001, which was a very interesting time because it was about, 6 months before 9/11. So there was a lot to deal with. And then we had a small little art movie called Lord of the Rings, which we had tried to
small little house beauty,
which we had to try to figure out who's going to go see this movie, given it might sound like it was a success right now, but certainly back then, the only people who were aware of it were, 50-year-olds, a bunch of nerds, who were Peter Jackson,
Yeah, for sure.
And then every high school person like myself who bought the books and never read them, just so we could sort of say we had them. Anyway, that's another story and another podcast perhaps, but it was pretty amazing.
What a great history. And, independent filmmaking, as we enter this era of how is AI impacting filmmaking, I actually think there's a pendulum that swings and it will swing back towards independent filmmaking because these filmmakers are scrappy. They work with no money, but they tell great human stories that are authentic. And, there's a criticism from whatever's happening with AI and film that where are we going? Is it synthetic? Where's the soul? Where's the creator? Who's writing the stories? And, I think there will be an audience desire for independent films again. And I think there's a opportunity and a resurgence of that amidst all this technology disruption, all the studio disruption. And so, I think there's a lot of hope for filmmakers. I don't think it's a pessimistic future. What do you think about the future of filmmaking and AI?
I think AI has certainly leveled the playing field in terms of being able to do the physical, or the physical means of making a movie. I think that's all great. I don't think AI will ever be able to write an original screenplay that an audience would necessarily respond to, because again, as Goldman said many, many years ago, nobody knows anything about this business, and it still seems to ring true. The studios have certainly gone for a very tried and true formula, but the independents, they are definitely thriving. I think the problem that the independents have right now is the theatrical experience has certainly dimmed, mostly because of the pandemic and the contraction of a lot of movie theaters.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what was a rush of content that was welcomed by all these new streamers, it has also started to flatline a little bit. So it could be a tricky time for the next few years. I think AI will very successfully integrate itself into the process and into the system. But then the question then becomes, well, what are the outlets? Where can these movies be shown? If there was an aggregating streamer that took every wonderful art movie or specialized film that was done in the past, every year, and was able to put them on a streaming service and interact with an exhibition chain. So it was a seamless integration from even a limited run in theaters and then moving right into a platform. I think that's a very successful formula for independent film. But again, right now it's scattered. It's all over the place. You have Hulu, you have this one, that one. They're all playing, versions of these movies and picking up. It's sort of really cherry picking,
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't too many young filmmakers who are really being consistent outside of people like Sean Baker, who has Honora coming out right now, and the Florida Project, very, very low budget films, extraordinarily original.
Yeah.
We need more of him at the same, or her, whoever it will be. Greta Gerwig, certainly. But to survive in the independent world is very difficult now. It's very difficult. And raising money is even more so. So again, the AI tools that are around certainly help, the production process, which is great. And I think everybody should embrace those. I mean, with people lose their jobs, animators lose their job because it could all be, pre-configured. Will the screenwriter lose their job because they can, someone can use, AI or some screenwriting program to write? I don't really necessarily think so. I used ChatGPT just yesterday to write a poem. I'd written a poem forever. And, it was very treacly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm spending the next 5 days, trying to rewrite it. But that's sort of what it is. It got me going. So I think that's a good
Yeah.
point.
I mean, you're at the center of that, right? You had an idea, you went to this AI platform and you're trying to get results and work with it. I think these, screenwriters, editors, they have to realize that they're still at the center of what they could create. And if they look at it as a tool and not a replacement, because robots aren't going to write these things. It's going to be a human using these tools, just like, we've moved from a typewriter to a word processor to a computer. I mean, those are all things. And then the internet, these are all things that have helped people write, research, organize thoughts. And so now with ChatGPT or GPT search, don't go out to Google anymore. They're finding more meaningful results with these new AI platforms. So let's just talk about education for a little while, because you are leading the next generation of young creative producers, filmmakers, film marketers.
Well, I'm not sure who's leading who, but okay.
Well, I mean, you're in a position, right? And you had in your locale, your finger on the pulse of what the students are thinking, and how are they embracing AI?
Well, I teach in the marketing world. I'm not in the production world right now. So all my students are creative producers, and they are, a lot of the projects which I give them are There's no wrong or right answers. It's not like a math class that I teach where this is yes and this is no. I just try to engage them to think creatively about marketing campaigns, about the kind of content they want to go ahead and produce when they graduate. And we certainly put them on paths towards that. And yes, they all use it. Like I've said to them, look, I'm happy for you to use AI in any way you want in terms of putting together a marketing deck, but just put it in your own voice. Because one thing I have seen is there's a lot of cut and pasting, and I just said, guys, no, that's not the way it works.
Right.
I'm fine with you using it as a template, but get original about it. Because again, when you ask someone to break down a social media campaign on TikTok, TikTok AI can do it one particular way, but it becomes a very generic way of doing it. Whereas a student who might be living TikTok, will come up with some really interesting ideas. So, it's sort of a little bit of a dance I do with them to try to get them to use it. And I certainly don't discourage them from using it. At the same time, they've got to remain creative in their thinking. And, whether it's marketing or developing a script, it's sort of the same world, all the same idea.
Yeah. I remember my time as a creative executive at Universal, I had to read the screenplays before the films were made, then, watch the films once they were made and see how maybe that script changed or whatever evolved, but fascinating process. But, we as marketers had to know every line in that movie and determine, hey, is this a line that could be in a trailer, right? And is this a scene that should be in a trailer? And that kind of intimate knowledge by reading it and then watching it has to mean something more than putting in the entire screenplay, which I wouldn't do, into ChatGPT and say, hey, create a campaign from this. It's like, there's still this human dissection and understanding and synthesis of what is read and understood. And, the human light bulb goes off and says, oh my God, this is the way to position it, right? Because this is the hook, right? There's some type of, catalyst for creativity spark there that's human based on your knowledge of the subject, right? And you can't rely on these tools. Now, once you have that initial insight, you could guide it. You could say, hey, create a campaign around this character who, has a certain amount of scenes and a point of view, and maybe build that out and create some type of campaign, whether it's a trailer or social media campaign. But that's, the human being at the center of that, driving that. And then it's just a tool. So
it seems like the prompt is very, very important, and increasingly so. And you have to sort of drill down when you get these prompts. And after you get the first version, say, that's fine, but try this, or maybe do this, do that. You have to be very polite, I've learned.
To say please and thank you.
I can't get mad at ChatGPT because that's a shitty ass job you just did. It's not going to resonate. So, but yes, I agree with you. That human spark of creativity will never go away because you can't invent that. You cannot. You can write a screenplay based on, a parameter. You come up with, a horror screenplay relatively easily through ChatGPT. But again, what's that special, unique thing? The same way as independent movies thrive, not because they are necessarily produced well or shot well, or they have a talent in it, but it's about what's the kernel of the idea that makes it unique, that can actually, intrigue an audience, wanting to see it, online or offline. And I don't think that's something that any kind of a program can really replicate.
Yeah, Hollywood in general, they are immersed in, sequel-topia, Marvel, mania, I just don't see how that can be perpetuated. Certainly the budgets and some recent failures for the Marvel type of storytelling. They may have been great comic books, but I don't think Disney's done a great job of extending that library. And I think there's burnout, coupled with less people going to the movies to see these big effects movies. But, I think the audience is becoming nostalgic and wanting something else, What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know that adult dramas will ever make a big comeback in through the studio system. The 25 to $35 million movie, which is basically a passion project with a director and some talent. I think they will still be around, and those are the ones that might get nominated for into the awards cycle. But they're not big money makers, and I think that's always a problem. With these studios which are owned by these mega companies, they're pressured to produce a $500 million result on anything is extraordinary. So I say let the studios play that game. I think they will continue to do it. I think there will always be some mining done. All right, so Marvel is now maybe run its course, but now maybe DC is going to come around, or whatever the next universe will be. I think those aren't necessarily going away. And even now, you notice Netflix is now creating the world of Bridgerton, and they're doing spin-offs of all those characters. So, the same idea. And everybody is taking what is what's an established IP or piece of content and basically expanding it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And they all have a half-life.
Yeah.
There's a point when you get exhausted. I mean, I'm curious what's going to happen with the Penguin series now with Batman and all that. They might be on to some of them.
Penguin did better than the new Joker movie, right? Which is the worst movie. So it's sad. I think not only the worst, comic book movie, but I think the worst movie of all time. It's unfortunate. Why? Because the original Joker was really powerful. It's like amazing how
Yeah, they went back to the well. I mean, yes, they try to come up with a unique way of doing it through music, whatever. I still haven't seen it yet, but I will. But again, going back to Venice, trying to premiere it again, you cannot do it a second time because everybody is so cynical about, well, why are you doing this again?
Yeah.
You already had this success, take it and run. Don't come back
Right.
and try to do it again. And I think, it just sort of, the snowball just sort of snowballed from there. People started to pile on it. I mean, regardless of how good the movie was or not, I mean, it might have been a misfire because of trying to mix, the characters of those two plus music and, and Joaquin is, he's such an interesting actor, but there's a point where,
Yeah. He's a great actor. I remember Clay Pigeons back in the day. I thought that was a great film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we get back to the AI discussion, we talked about screenwriting, human-centered or creative-centered AI, and that, creators could and should be in the driver's seat to steer this technology. It's a tool, not a replacement. There's a lot of disruption, certainly as the streaming wars are coming to an end. And you're right that every studio decided they had to be a streamer, which was a false pretense and not sustainable. So now you see a lot of consolidation, bundling, and perhaps the Paramount deal will go through. I think there's some recent challenges on that with the Skydance.
Happen.
I hope so, because I think David Ellison's very, creative minded.
Well, there's a friendly administration coming up, which I think will bless that rather easily, particularly with Dad. Dad and Donald are, probably pretty tight, I think. So
Yeah.
toward.
Yeah. So we'll see. But, does this kind of reshuffling of the deck of what studios are supposed to do, what streamers are supposed to do, is that a new opportunity for independent film? And will AI help independent filmmakers level up their films with limited budgets?
It certainly was, when these streamers were, going through their expansion, not any different than what it was like during the DVD days when all these movies were being made that never saw a theatrical release and went right on to, into Blockbuster. But now that doesn't exist anymore. Those movies don't exist anymore. And I think it's going to get harder in terms of where these movies can be placed. I mean, I'm going to Sundance in a month and a half, and there'll be 300 movies there with, 150 directors and producers, fawning over the few Asians that might be trying to buy this stuff with the companies. And, it's not going away, but I think there's fewer and fewer deals right now. And I think a lot of the challenges for independent filmmaking is how do you do it yourself?
Yeah.
You know, after you're sort of 15 minutes and nobody buys your movie, you know, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, and you got to satisfy your investors. And I don't care whether you made your movie for $50,000 or $5 million. You know, there's still a necessity to pay back your investment is to try to amortize it. You know, try to make as much money as you can based on what you've got. So that's a big learning process for independent filmmakers and producers. And even the whole documentary world, which was very, very hot for a long time. Yeah, Netflix is buying them left and right, and Hulu. They're still available, but again, it's not like it was a couple of years ago. So I think, and a lot of this, you know, some of it was strike driven, some of it is based on consolidation. I think a lot of these smaller movies that were at one point place fillers, so to speak, not to denigrate them, there's no longer the need for that. You know, all these streamers are doing original programming. They don't necessarily need to acquire movies anymore. So it's, you know, it'll be a challenge, but I do think this will turn. I keep telling my students that, you know, don't worry about getting a job in June, worry about it in August. And if it doesn't work then, it'll happen in September. It's going to turn. I think there'll be a sort of an upswing, but it's going to take a couple of years before it happens again.
Yeah, I think we're still getting over the pandemic and retraining a new generation to go back to the movies. But essentially, you know, people do love movies. You know, it's undeniable. Such a rich history, and I think you're right. In a couple of years, it's, you know, retraining the audience. It's let the dust settle from whatever mergers and acquisitions might happen. But there's certainly a desire. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so it's never going to go away. It's just the business of it is changing, and that's forcing these studios to reconsider, you know, technology plays. Should they be a streamer or not? Should they be global? Or all these things are forcing monetary pressures on the slate, right? How many films can a studio make? How many TV series can a studio make? And we haven't even talked about, you know, the death of cable, which has also been, you know, part of entertainment. So
yeah, the same have all these streamings, but they're fast, you know, they're free advertising supported television now. They're all sort of going back to the cable model. It's just pretty funny.
Yeah, what goes around comes around. It's like, yeah, it's exhausting to think about, but you know, I love and support certainly the filmmaking community, the film marketing community. And if people love movies always need to be marketed and people need to be able to find them. You know, that's one criticism of Apple. They have some great series on there, but no one knows about them. It's not too many advertising.
I know, it's interesting. Apple's very interesting. I mean, obviously they don't need it. And they are very, very low.
They're not the most popular streamer, but they have money, and they you know, put money and attract great stars. But you know, there's just no awareness, right? I mean, you created campaigns. It's like you go wide, you go small, you go wide. You know, there's money, there's millions of dollars behind the campaign, so you can make a, you know, $1 billion movie, but there's just none of that marketing with some of these streamers.
Well, they lost $237 million on Killers of the Flower Moon. I ran the numbers in my class last week, which was pretty astonishing. And I do think that, you know, after that one and Napoleon and Argyle, you know, they're all pulling back from these big budget movies. I think they realized, even Apple realizes that, you know, it's not, you know, even Wolves, which was there, Brad Pitt,
right,
George Clooney, which was all destined to go theatrically, they decided at the last minute it's not worth spending the $55 million or $60 million in marketing costs. And it went online, and you know, it's done fine there. So I think the big streaming $200 million plus movies going away. That's not going to happen anymore, which is fine. You know, you don't. There's a reason that movie wasn't decided, it wasn't picked up by anybody else. Not that it's a bad movie, but I mean, the economics were just sort of impossible.
Right.
And certainly from a traditional point of view, you know, it's the same way when you go to Sundance. You know, there's all these little companies like Searchlight and Focus, are all battling each other at A24, battling each other to pay $5 million to $6 million, for a movie. And all of a sudden Apple comes along and they say, oh no, we'll pay 25 and goodbye.
Yeah.
And it's over.
Yeah. Right.
And you can blame the filmmakers for taking the money. Look, Coda is a perfect example. They spoofed it up, a couple of years ago, and they ended up with the best picture.
Yeah. Well, something on Killers of the Flower Moon, the book was better than the movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, these are very difficult projects. I mean, the talent is extraordinary, and I'm sure there'll be more, but I think even Netflix is saying, well, I guess there was a recent deal with Wuthering Heights, which is Margot Robbie was directing it. I mean, producing it, maybe starring in it with Emerald Fennell, who did Sulper, the director, very hot director. And I believe that Netflix offered them $150 million for the movie. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And they said no.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to Warner Brothers, who promised them the full theatrical release, with all the bells and whistles, and they paid him $80 million for it. So who knows how much the movie actually cost to make?
Right.
It's going to spring the $70 million profit line, which they walked away from. But again, a lot of these filmmakers realize that, and I think the streamers do too, that the theatrical experience is still really, really important. The creating awareness and want to see. It also has sort of set the scene for the long tail of these movies as they get licensed throughout their 10-year lives, on television, come back again, windowing, all that kind of stuff. So again, but the problem is with the smaller movies, even though everybody acknowledges how important theatrical is, the means of that distribution are so expensive that it's sort of a push and pull as to what, where do you draw the line? How much can you spend? I do think that sort of the limited theatrical release now that some of these movies are getting, where they play 2 to 3 weeks at a theater, with a limited amount of money. But again, you get publicity, you get reviews,
marketing,
all the required stuff. And then if you go into a streamer, 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, and all that attention has already been created theatrically, it pays off,
No, name recognition, star recognition, there's value in that they've seen elsewhere that drive them to their every night experience. Well, what's on Netflix tonight? The other thing I want to ask about is, I think Netflix is reconsidering their business model, because that quote unquote, there is no back end, right? With Netflix, certainly, which has been the case, but now they're reconsidering based on performance metrics, which have been a mystery of like, how well does a movie do on Netflix? What are you measuring? Subscriptions? It's like, that's one thing, but when they say the most watched movie, like compared to what, it's Nielsen's out the window, right? Whatever the metrics were in the film industry, which very well, those are all shot to hell. And then Netflix has its own model of measuring success. And how do you determine a back end deal, which don't exist at this point, but maybe part of the future moving forward?
I think it will, but again, it was a very, very enticing idea when a company like Netflix comes to you and say, okay, your budget is $10 million. We'll pay you 30% on top of that. You have 100% creative control, and, we'll just take it when you deliver it. I mean, that's a very enticing proposition for a filmmaker, for an agent. You're worrying about the back end because you're getting it up front. And, a lot of deals went down that way. And a lot of filmmakers said, sure, okay. Now that kind of, percentage above budget is changing. Mm-hmm. So if that's supposed to get lower, then of course, how do you determine, what they should be getting to replace that additional percentage they were getting? Right. Therefore, the metrics are now starting to come back in. But again, it's really only the super filmmakers and the super producers and showrunners, which is sort of getting those deals now.
Of course, used to be making, multi-picture deals, right, with Netflix.
But at the same time, they might be getting a back end, but the budgets might not necessarily be through the roof anymore. So,
well, times. So any pearls of wisdom on AI in film? And I just wanted to shout out, thank you for participating in our El Salon. It was a big success, and you're your content has been amplified on social, by the way. So thanks for doing that and supporting that effort. And you do have an important voice based on your career and knowledge and your position, which certainly within the education community now. So thank you for all that you do. But any last pearls of wisdom to young filmmakers, young marketers, industry executives of where this is all going and how it could help or hinder?
It's not any different than the way it's always been, that you've got to be tenacious. You've got to love rejection. There's a saying that Billie Jean King used to say with her tour tennis players, pressure is a privilege. And, it certainly exists in the film business. And I think, it's just about being tenacious about it and not giving up. And you will be, you'll have a worse batting average than any baseball player, much less than 30%. You'll get a hit. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong. You're just evolving in your career. And at some point it catches, it always catches, but you have to stay with it. It's really, really important. And it's very frustrating, I know.
Yeah. Persevere. And I love the notion of embracing rejection as part of the process. That is. So listen, thanks, Russell, so much. Thank you for tuning in. All of you who are listening or watching, and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music. And please follow and smash that subscribe button. That's really important. And or download these podcasts. That's really important for our measurement and our metrics. So thanks again, Russell. I hope to have you on again, and good luck to you with Sundance. Have fun at Sundance. That's always fun.
All right.
Gonna move away from Salt Lake City though, or Park City.
And my hunch is it's going to stay in Salt Lake, and it'll become a Salt Lake festival because it's a much more functional city, and Park City will still be there, but for the events, and the specialized style. I have a feeling it's not going anywhere.
City, Santa Fe lost out on it. Oh well.
That would have been nice.
Show the Southwest image in your background there.
Yeah, exactly. Monument. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. A lot of fun to talk.
Thank you. Take care.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology. CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.